You're listening to Experience This, a show about the emerging experience economy with your host, Tom Young.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Experience This. This is Tom Young. I'm sitting here with Kiran. How you doing,
Hey,
Kiran?
Tom. How's it going?
All right. Hey, today we wanted to talk about, we just had come off a great field trip. We went to some new retail spaces in New York, the Starbucks Roastery, the Samsung store, and Restoration Hardware. Pretty cool new retail concepts. And we wanted to think, next week we have the National Retail Federation at Jacob Javits. It's one of the largest retail trade shows coming in. We want to think about how do we take some of the things from that, the things we know from our consulting business around reimagining retail and rethinking the space. So we just watched this morning a few somewhat depressing videos
on a great start to the morning.
Abandoned malls and what's happening. And what's interesting is, the mall concept crept up. I guess it started very early in the 50s, but the heyday was the 1970s and 80s, and they probably built out about 1,500 malls around the country. And at its peak, it was probably employing just under 2 million people. And now it's down about 25% from that, and it's still declining.
Seemed like it was a social place for people and families to really get together and hang out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people who have gone through and looked at the etymology of malls and how it evolved from strip malls and plazas, from Main Street to strip malls and plazas, all the way up to enclosed malls.
Yeah.
And but one of the things we talk about, it's cliche to say that Amazon and digital e-commerce have been killing retail. That's like telling a drowning person the water is wet, because it's an obvious analysis. But the less obvious one to me is the mall served a purpose, and let's just say in the heyday, in the late 70s, early 80s, when I grew up, going to the mall was a fun thing to do. That was something to do. I mean, when you think about your options back then, you didn't have the entertainment options you have today.
Yeah. Even for teenagers, I mean, the social component that the mall offered was huge.
Yeah, and just your access to a variety of things.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go way back, let's pick 100 years. If you lived in a small village, you might have had one general store. Your choice for a dress or shoes or anything was you bought what was at the general store.
Yeah.
Now there was these early days of catalogs. You could sift through the catalog and mail stuff, but you saw probably a hand-drawn picture of what it was, and it took probably weeks to get to you. So it's very different. So the malls gave you sort of a concentrated access to a new variety of things that you didn't get. So it solved the problem. And this is where I think, when we think more broadly about how e-commerce has hurt retail, one of the things there's two kinds of competition. There is supply side competition. It's somebody who does the mall exactly the way they're doing it, better, faster, cooler, cheaper, et cetera. And that's a threat you have. A mall opens up down the street, they're newer, better, people are going to go there instead of where your old mall. But I think what's really been happening is demand side threats, which is new emerging business models have taken the demand away from going to the mall.
Yep.
It's not that malls are even a bad deal. It's just that there's better deals somewhere else, and people are solving their needs by, you don't overuse the Amazon example, but if I need to get something, I can go on Amazon and just click, and it's there, and it's cheaper, and it saves me time.
Do you think it's also a little bit of a case of that traditionally in retail, you would have, you would go there to find products, well-designed products. It's almost as if products were driving demand and traffic. Whereas today, the consumers through Instagram, for example, are the ones that are setting the tone for what the products are. So it's more the people are the front lines of setting the trends versus before it was the buyers at Macy's who would put these products in the stores and you would go there to see them. So the paradigm has kind of shifted.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, all those things are true. I mean, you're seeing a different trend. You know, you would go to the store back in the 1970s and 80s, and you'd see things you didn't see before.
Yeah.
And
you don't have to do that now, though.
And so you would go shopping almost like in a hunter-gatherer. It was equivalent to hunting. You know, look what I found. I found a great deal, a bargain. Those kind of things get lost today when I can do a search on one of these search engines and find the best price, the best availability. And you have to say there's still a notion of treasure hunting when you go shopping, but it's a small percentage of what people buy. Yeah,
and I also think you have to, the motivation to get people to walk through the doors has to be a lot higher than online. You can just click through, pages. You can cover the ground of a mall in probably about 10 minutes versus physically walking through all of the stores. So yeah, definitely. I also think it's just made it easier, and I think that the I guess they use the term customer acquisition, or the way to get people to come in, has just gone up exponentially.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about today is, we can talk about all the negative stuff. There's a lot of people have already decomposed that. We saw this YouTube channel of deadmalls.com and other things like that. It's very interesting to see that. It's a little negative energy. But if we think about what's the positive side of this, there are some pretty good visions for the future of retail. And to me, it goes back to what we talked about in the basis of our conversations on this podcast series is the experience economy. Is how do I, if I'm a store trying to compete with Amazon on Amazon's terms, which is price and availability, I'm going to lose.
Yeah,
you're going to lose that battle. But what Amazon doesn't have, for the most part, I mean, they have a few retail outlets, but what they don't have is they don't have the bricks and mortar. So for them to sell an experience, the best thing they can do is sell a digital experience. They can't sell a social experience or a tactile or analog experience in a way that a physical store could, where somebody wants to actually interact with the product or do something socially around that product. So think of a store that sells soaps or candles, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to smell a soap or feel it or smell a candle online, right? You can, once you know what you want, you can go buy it, resupply online, but to actually buy it for the first time or experience it, you really need to be there, and that's what stores have that purpose. So you think at a simple level, how do I create a situation when I design retail where an analog experience is an integral part of the commerce?
Yeah. And one example that really comes to mind, and it was talked about last year at the conference that you're attending next week, is a store in Manhattan and Chelsea on 10th Avenue called Story, which has done a great job of redefining that whole retail experience. So basically what Story does, and I think we talked about it in a little bit on one of our previous podcasts, is that it allows you, it deconstructs the store every 4 to 8 weeks, and everything is centered around a theme. So they're not just buying products and putting a bunch of stuff on shelves. They have an actual story that they built. So welcome home for the holidays. It's summertime. Those are the themed stories. Mm-hmm. Love is in the air, etc.
Right.
And based on that story, the merchandise will help tell that story. So the story is driving the experience. It's not just a collection of hodgepodge products.
So we go back to the experience, right? So think about the source of the ultimate design of the malls from the 70s and 80s was, an updated replacement of Main Street. How can we recreate that Main Street where we take a new imagining? So this is I have up on the screen here. This is a company called Westfield, and they're putting this project out there called Westfield Destinations. It's a 2028 vision of what malls might look like. Here's a picture up on the here. It's pretty cool. Yeah. When I looked through this, what this reminded me of was our walk down the High Line where you create these spaces that are of mixed use.
Yes.
And what's interesting about it's an abstraction to say, I want to create an experience around going to the mall. It's an abstraction, but what I would say, if I start to break it down, what we're trying to say is, if I go to the store and the store is a passive experience, meaning that the product sits on the shelves, it's up to me to go find it and see what I want, maybe do a price comparison, and then go buy that and check out. That's a very passive architecture for that retail outlet. An active experience would be where I have to go there to participate. So think of a Williams Sonoma who sells kitchen stuff.
Yep.
Now, if you go in there, they have, I'm just going to make up a number because I honestly don't know what they have, but let's just say they have 4,000 SKUs in the store. But we know from just doing any kind of analysis that it's an 80-20 rule.
Right.
80% of their, or 20% of their SKUs are 80% of their revenue. If they just cleared out some of their space and creating cooking classes, and they do some of this, by the way, but cooking classes and experiences, wine tastings, all different kinds of things, and then integrate the retail with that experience of here's how you cook some new Italian dish, or here's a wine pairing tasting on how you do something, but an experience, it's going to be packed. So TJ and Cassidy, they live in Hoboken, right next to Trader Joe's.
Right.
And next to that is this company called Hudson Table.
Oh, right. It's a cooking classes.
Yeah, they do cooking classes, and it's packed. Now, with that, they sell a gear that goes with that. So they're kind of mixing the retail with the experience, and it becomes very active. So if you think about this picture that's up on here, and people can go to this website. It's fashionnetwork.com. It's the Westfield destination vision. But these pictures here, you can see it creates. Cool. It's very similar to our Hudson Yards walk, where you can create a place that's mixed.
Yes.
So, and it has active stuff. So if you started to think about, I don't want to put retail in here as much as I want to put retail and things like, I could say banking. Banking's becoming more virtualized, but banking, or a doctor, or even restaurants and taverns, where we start to bring other experience things together and integrate the retail with a broader experience.
Yeah, and actually referencing Hudson Yards and our walk on the High Line, there is a shopping mall that's slated to go up as part of that development. But what you'll notice is it's tied into we talked in our last podcast about the culture shed. So events are going to be going on. There is a project there called The Vessel, which is shaped like a honeycomb that you'll just be able to, it's an art installation that people will be able to engage with and walk up the steps and see the city from different viewpoints. So you're not just going to a boxed mall. You're going to, again, same thing that Westfield's trying to do for their 2028 vision. You're going to a space that has multiple things going on, and you're part of the engagement. You're part of that story.
So when we talk about working with companies who want to redesign retail, there's a lot of people out there that are going to raise their hand and say, I can help. And there are probably a lot more ideas and ability to implement them. But one of the things that we have done in our broader consulting is the notion of focusing on customer journeys.
Yep.
And I think it's important for retailers to understand what they're competing with. So if they think that they're selling a product and they're competing on product availability and price and functionality and quality, et cetera, that's only a component of it. To me, they're also competing for time.
For sure.
And so I have to want to go spend time to go to that store to experience something else and have that be not a chore. I have to go shopping like it's a chore to turn it into an experience. Now, again, I don't want to overuse Amazon, but when they bought Whole Foods, people go to Whole Foods and it's a destination.
Yes, and I don't know about the ones here in New Jersey.
They just opened one here in Bridgewater.
Okay, I went to one in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
which was great. Basically, you walked in upstairs and they had local food vendors. They had a bar. You went to the pasta station. They were making the pasta fresh. You can get it by half pound, etc. It just felt so much more immersive than going to a regular grocery store. And we stayed. We stayed probably for 2 hours. We spent at Whole Foods, and we actually had a drink at the bar. And I don't think I would have ever imagined sitting down at a grocery store having a glass of wine or a beer.
Yeah. So think of in New York City, right? In Bryant Park. It's the park right next to the public library on 42nd and 6th. There's a Whole Foods right there.
Yep.
Now, they've designed that Whole Foods to be an extension of the park, right? So when you walk out of the park, it's on the northwest corner of the park. You walk right across the street and you walk into the Whole Foods. And they've designed the layout of the store to accommodate their customers.
Right.
And the customers are the people who are walking, in many cases, right out of the park for a picnic. The Bryant Park has a great field for picnics. It's probably one of my favorite parks in New York. And you walk in and they have basically the equivalent of prepackaged picnic baskets where you can go buy stuff and then go hang out in the park and enjoy it. And then you go up to the second level and they have all the foods and the things you need for shopping. They don't have the same kind of selection as a superstore because of the square footage they have. But the front of the store is all restaurants and active stuff going on overlooking the park.
Yeah, it's an extension of your lifestyle, basically.
And so they've created a notion of experiential, active stuff. They've tied it back to your trip to the park. And now they're able to command probably higher margins, higher throughput. They're not competing with other people who are trying to sell groceries for cheaper. You could probably take a subway ride or a car ride to New Jersey and get all that stuff cheaper if that was your goal. But it'll be a waste of your time because you're there to experience Bryant Park. You're there to experience New York City on a nice day. You walk into Whole Foods, you're going to pay what you're going to pay to get that stuff.
And just because we are in the business of technology, the cool thing about going into that Whole Foods or the Starbucks that we went into is that obviously they're probably collecting consumer data, but all of that is, so hidden from the customer. So you just go there and enjoy your visit. It's not, you don't really feel the barge of technology in your face or it being so prevalent. So I think they've done that really well, probably gathering data points in the back end, but it being just completely seamless to the front end user.
So to me, I think, when we think about reimagining retail, to me, the future vision is mixed use design.
Definitely.
It has active elements and a high experience thing, but you are competing. To me, if I'm bricks and mortar and I'm trying to compete with online commerce, I want to change the rules of that engagement from price and availability, which I'm going to lose that game most of the time, to one that includes an experiential or time component, entertainment. So think of shopping as a form of entertainment. We had a great time when we visited those stores, and I would do it again. I think Starbucks has probably the highest repeatability of those. But I even think we didn't visit this place, another store in New York over by in Midtown, the Tommy Bahama's store.
Oh, right.
They have a restaurant attached to it. I like Tommy Bahama's products. I like to shop there. And they've turned their retail. It's a pretty expensive place, but it's experiential when you go in there. But then they extend it to a nice tiki bar cafe and restaurant. It's nice, so that's more repeatable.
Right.
But now that becomes a destination where I want to go and spend time. And so I think when you go back to the deconstruction, there's a vision of let's make it active.
Yep.
Let's make it experiential, and let's change the rules so that we're not trying to compete on just price and availability. And then the blocking and tackling of how you do that is you really need to understand your your customers. And it goes back to the customer experience. And so when we get down to the thing we do with clients is we sit down and we do design customer personas. What kind of customers do you have? Profile the personas, map them out in terms of which ones are important to you, and then map their journey in terms of their relationship with your retail establishment and what are the things that they can do.
Yep, definitely.
So we also see you start to see this, and I noticed this in amusement parks where they shifted their retail into the exit of a ride at the park.
Oh, right, because you have the memorable experience.
It's experiential shopping.
Yes.
Right. So the amusement parks have already figured this out, that if they create a store and just make that a store at the park, people are going to walk right by. But when you go on a ride, whether it be Space Mountain at Disney World or a Superman ride at Universal Studios, you walk through the store and you see related merchandise to that, and you associate that experience. You have a great experience. You buy that. Now, I'm sure they do that because it's successful.
Yeah, and I think that they have done that very well. They're capitalizing on the emotion, and I think people want to. If you've had a great emotion or a positive experience, you will open up your wallet to hold on to that positive experience.
And it's not just about dollars and cents at that point.
No, it's not.
And so in that sense, an online store isn't really competing with that after ride show store.
Yes.
They're not really competing in that way.
No.
So I remember I took my girls. They loved going to Disney World, and we went to this ride that they like to go on, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. I mean, I don't know how many times you can go on that, but apparently an infinite amount of times. But when we walked out of the store, there's a nicely laid out store. When you walk out, you can look at ride pictures, and then you walk out and you can buy. And I would say one time, almost every trip, we end up buying a T-shirt or a hat or something like that as a remembrance of that, because they also date it. So it'll say Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, I survived, or whatever. Or sometimes they're even nice shirts, so they'll have a date on it. It'll say 2019, or then you say, oh, that's my remembrance of this trip. So the same kind of thing is going to be, we're going to have to tie in, and when we rethink, like when we look at this Westfield property and we think about how Hudson Yards and the whole Highline area, they're going to redesign that. It's going to be highly experiential. You're going to mix in active things with retail, and it's going to, when we talk about reimagining retail, that's how I think of it.
I do too. I think it's lifestyle. It's building more of a lifestyle brand versus just a physical location. It's getting people out of their homes, active, doing stuff, participating, engaged, and there's movement involved. So I think it's a lot more components that touch people in deeper places than just products.
So when I go to the conference, the expo next week at the Javits Center, I'm gonna be looking at what all these retailers are thinking about in terms of the experience and how they plan to evolve their business models.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting.
We see enough of the decline of classic retail to understand that it needs to be rethought if it's going to survive and thrive. Mm-hmm. So the mall concept from the 1970s and 80s is probably not a concept that's going to survive outside of a few markets. And the challenge you're going to have if you own one of these places, or if you're a business trying to locate there, is, what's the right business model, and what am I really selling, and what do my customers need? Because I do think the thing that we're underestimating here is you are competing with time.
Yes.
So anyway, any other parting comments on this? We'll talk about this next week when we get back.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear how the conference is going to be.
Great. All right. Well, thanks very much.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Hey, this is Kiran Bajwa. Thanks for checking out the show today. If you like what you heard, head on over to our website, rumjog.com. If you happen to be in the New York or New Jersey area, come check out our meetup called Digital Disruption. We cover topics like you heard today with a live audience. Lastly, don't forget to follow us on social media using the handle @rumjog. Talk to you soon.